So what can we do about this? So we need to understand all of the different aspects of these ecosystems. And one thing that has gotten a lot of attention lately has been edges or ecotones. And that's where you have biomes overlapping. And there is a crazy set of parameters there because you have overlapping of different parameter or different types of situations. And so this is actually an area where they've found a lot of speciation happening because it's just kind of so unique. Now, one thing that scientists are doing, which I think is interesting, is something called movement corridors. And movement corridors are going to be where you have patches of isolated habitat, and then you link them with quality habitat so they can get from place to place. If I can pull this up. There we go. So this is an example of a wildlife corridor here. So you have good habitat here, but it's isolated by this road. So what they've done is built this little wildlife bridge, and so they can actually have gene flow between the two populations. So it's good for increasing gene flow. It's good for allowing them to migrate and those types of things. But there are drawbacks to this. If you have smart predators, they're going to just hang out there because it's like a buffet, right? So they're like, oh, sweet, you know what? There's some deer coming and they have nowhere else to go, right? So that could be an issue. Also, if you have a disease breakout in one area, it kind of sucks that you could have that flow where the disease could come over and get the other guys. But it's a step in sort of the right direction, making that kind of balance between us and nature, right? So another thing that is important is designating what are called biodiversity hotspots. So those are going to be areas that are small. They have exceptionally high amounts of what are called endemic species. Endemic species are going to be species that are only found in that location. So if they go extinct, they're gone, right? So since they're so concentrated, we really, really want to protect them because they're high points of extinction because they're not, those endemic species aren't found anywhere else. And then the last thing we're going to talk about here is habitat restoration. So let's say that we have totally screwed up an ecosystem. How do we bring it back? So there's basically going to be two forms of restoration ecology. There's bioremediation and bioaugmentation. So bioremediation is actually putting organisms into an area to detoxify, right? So I think, oh no, yeah, I do have pictures, sorry. Okay. Oh, there's another wildlife corridor that's pretty pimpin'. Okay, so one example that I'm going to tell you about bioremediation that I think is very interesting is a story about this plant called the water hyacinth. So the water hyacinth plant is something that was brought from Asia in the 20s or 30s, I believe, to New Orleans. And somebody said, oh, that's pretty, but I don't want it. So they tossed it in the lake behind their house. Within a couple of weeks, it was so thick you could walk over it. And they were like, I don't want this anymore. So they threw it in the canal. Well, canals lead to other places, and now the water hyacinth has taken over the south. And so nobody knows what to do with it. So one farmer said, well, what if I feed it to my cows? This is awesome. It replaces itself. So he's feeding it to his cows, and the cows were just getting skinnier and skinnier because there's no nutritional value to it. So he was like, ugh. So what they have done is NASA has had a huge environmental issue. You know all those Hubble telescope photos that they take? So NASA actually, when they develop the Hubble telescope pictures, they create silver as a byproduct. So they totally polluted this area behind their headquarters with silver. And of course, since they're rocket scientists, somebody tried to figure this out and said, oh, I bet the water hyacinth plant could fix this. So they put the water hyacinth plant in this lake that was all polluted. And what happens is water hyacinth likes to pick up silver. So it picked up the silver, they took the plants out, dried them out, and they actually burned them and were able to recycle the silver. So they actually are getting rid of an invasive plant and getting rid of that silver. So that's a great example of bioremediation. The other type of restoration is biological augmentation. So when you augment something, you're adding to it, right? So what happened there is a lot of times people will screw up a wetland. So this used to be a wetland and somebody had filled it in. And so what you can do is bioaugmentation, which is where you bring the plants back that you believe were there. You dig out what used to be the depth of that wetland. And sometimes you don't know, so you just have to guess. And then look at that a couple of years later. So that's pretty awesome, right? So that's biological augmentation, using plants, animals, and things to add back to the environment and try to bring it back to what it used to be. So I wanted to leave it on a high note. So there are some ways that we can actually make our wrongs a little bit more right. So that's good, right? So I hope you enjoyed that.